Chapter 1081, Blood God Crystal. The top of the cave instantly shattered. Boom. A heavy and enormous figure descended before the group of people. At the very middle of the figure was a ball of sparkling divine light, and it radiated a terrifying aura that made one's heart jump. The dust finally settled, and a crystalline monster appeared before Demigod Destruction, Sacred King Black Poison, and Sacred King Purple Poison. This crystal monster had fine facial features, and countless white lines ran through its body like veins. At the very center of these lines was gold and white divine light. You entered Master's body to try to steal Master's power? The crystal giant containing the ball of divine light spoke in a cold tone like it was a king looking down at its subjects as it looked at the non-humans in front of it. Sacred King Black Poison, Sacred King Purple Poison, and the other sacred lords in Demigod Destruction's group started to tremble and sweat coldly when facing the monstrous pressure of the crystal giant. The instinctive suppression made them unable to have any thoughts about fighting back. The divine power has turned into a Yao spirit. Could it have the power of a true god? Sacred King Black Poison was stunned. At the beginning, Zhao Feng's group and theirs had teamed up and thought about stealing this ball of divine power, but this divine power actually had its own consciousness. It was a Yao spirit. Humph, your master died long ago. Whoever manages to obtain what he left behind gets to keep it. Demigod Destruction squinted his eyes as he inspected the crystal giant in front of him. The source of this crystal giant's power was the white divine power, but that didn't mean the crystal giant could unleash its true power. If it could, that would mean that its cultivation had reached the heavenly divine realm, and it would have been repelled by this world and summoned by the ancient desolate realm of gods. Therefore, Demigod Destruction was certain that the Yao spirit in front of him wasn't as terrifying as they thought. Sacred King Black Poison looked at Demigod Destruction, and his heart shook. Demonic Sky Palace was originally just a normal 3-star power, but Sacred King Destruction managed to become a demigod not long ago, and Demonic Sky Palace became a peak 3-star force. Although Demigod Destruction only became a demigod recently, he had the eyes of destruction. This meant that even some demigods in the Dark Moon Lord dynasty that had lived for several dozen millennia weren't his match. Therefore, Demigod Destruction might very likely lead Demonic Sky Palace to become another 4-star power in the Dark Moon Lord dynasty. You want to obtain Master's power with just your strength? The Divine Power Crystal Giant couldn't help but laugh. Wang tilde. The ball of divine light in the Divine Power Crystal Giant's heart flashed and released a divine aura. The white lines around the Divine Power Crystal Giant's body also started to glow brighter. Only those that remain behind will get a share. Demigod Destruction's eyes were as bright as the sun as they radiated the laws of destruction that could destroy heaven and earth. Demigod Destruction couldn't force the other sacred lords to stay behind, but if he had their help, it would reduce a lot of pressure. Senior Destruction, we'll help you. Sacred Kings Black Poison and Purple Poison decided to remain behind, while the 2 early-stage sacred lords in Demigod Destruction's group decided to leave. Early-stage sacred lords didn't dare to participate in a fight that had reached the level of gods. Giant God Seal. The Divine Power Crystal Giant stepped forward and punched out, forming a golden seal that crushed over toward Demigod Destruction and company. Light of Destruction. Demigod Destruction's eyes suddenly changed and released a wave of golden light. The figures of Zhao Feng and company slowly appeared at the border of the god corpse with a flash of silver. This was the entrance that Zhao Feng and company first entered through. Before they took any action, Zhao Feng used the misty spatial world to leave a mark behind. So close. That was Demigod Destruction. Nan Gongsheng said through grated teeth. Even if Demigod Destruction didn't come, we would have left anyway. That ball of divine power already has its own consciousness. Zhao Feng said. What? It has its own consciousness? Nan Gongsheng was half in doubt. We should recover and consolidate our power here. Zhao Feng suggested. Everyone had used up a lot of energy a moment ago, and they were all injured to different degrees. Furthermore, Zhao Feng, Nan Gongsheng, and Zhao Yufei had all forcefully increased their cultivation to come here, so their foundations weren't as solid as they could be. Amongst them, Nan Gongsheng's foundation was the weakest. That'd be great. Zhao Yufei replied with a smile. The god corpse was the perfect place for her to cultivate since she had the bloodline of the spiritual race. Whoosh! A substandard god crystal appeared in Zhao Yufei's hand. This was the one she obtained from killing the crystal giant, so its grade was very high. Zhao Feng, why did you capture Sacred Lord Myriad Forms? Nan Gongsheng asked. They were in a lot of danger a moment ago, but Zhao Feng still wanted to capture Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. One could see how determined Zhao Feng was. I'm interested in the eyes of Myriad Forms. Zhao Feng gave a faint smile. In the fight earlier, Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei each obtained a few substandard god crystals, but that wasn't much in comparison to him capturing Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. Zhao Feng then entered the misty spatial world. Zhao Feng, what do you want? Sacred Lord Myriad Forms' muffled voice sounded. Sacred Lord Myriad Forms had been bound up by the little thieving cat. The cloud silkworm Saint Butterfly floated in the air above Sacred Lord Myriad Forms and released a powerful bloodline pressure and flapped its wings from time to time, unleashing a layer of dream pollen that made Sacred Lord Myriad Forms unable to resist. The little thieving cat would also hit Sacred Lord Myriad Forms' head from time to time with the spade. Gaze of the God Eye. A surge of monstrous eye power appeared from Zhao Feng's left eye. In just an instant, his left eye turned into a bottomless purple whirlpool that reached an everlasting abyss. A forbidden power that focused on the soul-covered Sacred Lord Myriad Form's body. This move again. Sacred Lord Myriad Form's soul became cold and started to leave his body. Zhao Feng's soul intent had reached the late stages of the mystic light realm, and a large amount of dream pollen had eroded Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. This made his soul extremely weak and unable to resist. Whoosh! Sacred Lord Myriad Form's soul was sucked into the dimension of Zhao Feng's left eye. I'll first enslave him, then steal his eyes of Myriad Forms after leaving the god corpse. Zhao Feng thought for a while before murmuring. At this time, Zhao Feng couldn't split his soul or else his soul intent would become weaker, and he would no longer be able to stay here. Besides, after enslaving Sacred Lord Myriad Forms, Sacred Lord Myriad Forms could help Zhao Feng, and he knew how strong the eyes of Myriad Forms were very clearly. After making this decision, Zhao Feng entered the dimension of his left eye and slowly imprinted the Dark Heart seal onto Sacred Lord Myriad Form's soul. Shoo! Zhao Feng returned Sacred Lord Myriad Form's soul back to his body. Master, do you have any orders? Sacred Lord Myriad Forms half knelt on the ground and said respectfully. Recover your strength first and help me when needed. Zhao Feng started to cultivate and consolidate his cultivation after resolving the issue of Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. Let's see how effective the substandard god crystals from the crystal giants are. A bright white and gold crystal appeared in Zhao Feng's hand. He started to circulate the 5-elemental wind lightning technique and absorb the energy within the substandard god crystal. A blood red crystal also appeared in Zhao Feng's hand. Zhao Feng multitasked and inspected this crystal pearl that radiated a terrifying bloodline aura. Zhao Feng had obtained this blood-colored crystal pearl from the bottom of the pond, but he didn't have time to inspect it then. It seems to be a god crystal. Zhao Feng concluded after inspecting it for a long time. After all, Zhao Feng had seen the evil god crystal before, and his little world of illusions also had a god crystal within it. However, this god crystal was different from the rest. Apart from the fact that it contained a wisp of divine power and the essence of heaven and earth, there was also an enormous amount of bloodline essence. Blood god crystal? Zhao Feng was stunned. This was a god crystal that contained the bloodline of the god corpse. According to the guesses of the continent's experts, this god corpse was most likely the giant god race, which was ranked 15th among the 10,000 ancient races. The giant god race was a terrifying race that was ranked even higher than the spiritual race, and the blood god crystal in Zhao Feng's hand might contain a wisp of its bloodline. Zhao Feng put the blood god crystal away after calming down. The value of this blood god crystal might very likely be even higher than Nan Gongsheng's evil god's crystal, but it would be a waste for Zhao Feng to use it. Firstly, Zhao Feng already had the perfect blood devil sun bloodline, and it had nothing in common with the giant god race bloodline. If he used the blood god crystal in a rush, who knew what would happen? Secondly, Zhao Feng's perfect blood devil sun bloodline was of extremely high grade as well. This wisp of giant god race bloodline might not be any stronger than Zhao Feng's perfect blood devil sun bloodline. Meow meow. The little thieving cat walked over with the green spiritual gourd, and Zhao Feng poured out the blood-colored liquid he had obtained from the pond. He then wiped it over his body as he activated the sacred lightning body. It can strengthen my bloodline and increase my state of existence. It also contains the element of earth. Zhao Feng's expression turned to joy. This blood-colored liquid was even more effective than the Skyfire Lightning Ape's bloodline. However, the main point was that it contained a wisp of the element of earth, which was very beneficial toward Zhao Feng's Earth of Wind Lightning. A day later, the physical aura radiating from Zhao Feng's body became stronger and stronger. He made more progress on the 6th level of the Sacred Lightning body and managed to completely consolidate his cultivation. His Earth of Wind Lightning was also more stable as well. Zhao Feng managed to resolve the problem of forcefully increasing his cultivation by using large amounts of the blood-colored liquid and some substandard god crystals. Whoosh! Zhao Feng left the misty spatial world. Nan Gongsheng had also managed to consolidate his cultivation in a day's time by using many resources. He gained control over a strong power, but since his understanding wasn't enough yet, he still couldn't completely master this power. He could just use it a bit better than before. On the other side, Zhao Yufei was also progressing very quickly. Her mystic light sacred power was more refined, it was almost comparable to the sacred power of sacred kings. However, Zhao Yufei had the same problem as Nan Gongsheng, her understanding wasn't enough yet. Let's go. There should be many resources in the God Corpse that can refine our souls and our comprehension. Zhao Feng said. He also needed these resources as well. The trio took action. The area they traveled through before was probably not even 1/10,000th of the total God Corpse. This was still just the edge of the God Corpse. Chapter 1082, Being Targeted Once More. Zhao Feng, Zhao Yufei, and Nan Gongsheng flew through the complex structure. Let's head toward the center of the God Corpse. This was their goal. The fortune and resources in the center of the God Corpse were definitely better than the outskirts. On the way, Zhao Feng would occasionally use the ability of his left eye to see through the crystal walls and scout out the place as well as search for treasures. They purposely avoided other groups, but they would compete with other groups if they noticed rare resources. Zhao Feng's group wasn't weak, and they worked well together. Normal groups led by sacred kings were unable to do anything to them. I wonder what happened with Demigod Destruction fighting the Divine Power Crystal Giant, Nan Gongsheng murmured. It was obvious that he still hadn't forgotten about the ball of divine power. It's hard to know. Zhao Feng shook his head. According to his guesses, the true strength of the Yao spirit shouldn't be less than Demigod Destruction. The defense and power of the Yao spirit were extremely great, it could use a wisp of divine power, and it might even have some of the techniques its master once had. The combination of these reasons meant that even Demigod Destruction, who had the eyes of destruction, might not be its match. However, there was also the possibility that the fight between them had attracted other groups over. All in all, there were too many possibilities, so it was hard to guess the result. In reality, Zhao Feng also really wanted that ball of divine power. Now that his cultivation was high enough, he could, in theory, absorb divine power. Furthermore, that divine power wasn't the same as the power of the evil god within Nan Gongsheng's body, it wouldn't affect his personality. If he could use divine power, Zhao Feng would have another trump card. He would be able to unleash devastating physical power just like Kun Yuan and Nan Gongsheng. On top of that, divine power was very useful for breaking through to the heavenly divine realm. Right at this point in time, a loud explosion sounded not far away. Zhao Feng and company were instantly alarmed. They could sense that the center of the explosion was very far away from them, but its power had actually spread all the way to them. From this, they could see how terrifying the explosion was. Let's go have a look. Zhao Feng suggested. A faint golden ripple of light spread across Zhao Feng's left eye as the trio started to approach the center of the explosion. A surge of divine aura could be felt, and it made them tremble. They were getting closer to the origin of the explosion. The crystal walls here have been damaged. Nan Gongsheng looked at the side and found some signs of the crystal walls being damaged. Zhao Feng was also able to see some other groups approaching with the ability of his left eye. They were obviously attracted by the explosion as well. That is? Zhao Feng's eye reached its limit after looking through several dozen crystal walls, and he saw some images. The majority of the walls there had been destroyed, and wisps of divine power were leaking from the walls. It made everywhere within a certain range of forbidden area. At the edges of the broken walls were two heavily injured sacred kings and several sacred lords. These two sacred kings were Sacred King Black Poison and Sacred King Purple Poison that Zhao Feng and company met earlier. Zhao Feng also knew one of the non-human sacred lords. It was Sacred Lord Sky Trampler. Sacred Lord Sky Tramper was the late-stage Elephant Man Sacred Lord that tried to take revenge on Zhao Feng alongside Sacred Lord Myriad Forms a while back. The tattered corpse of another non-human sacred lord lay not far from them, and their soul had been destroyed. Two figures flew out from the center of the explosion. Destruction, it was a bad choice to work with you this time. One of the figures was an elder of the elephant men race with dark yellow skin. He had a muscular figure, but his aura was weak, and he had an ugly expression. Ferocity, if it weren't for my eyes of destruction, you would have died to that explosion of divine power from the crystal giant. Demigod Destruction's eyes were dim. The strength that the divine power crystal giant had at the beginning exceeded the limits of what Demigod Destruction could handle. Demigod Destruction's group was chased for a while before they met Demigod Ferocity from the elephant men race. The two demigods teamed up, turned the tide, and started to chase after the divine power crystal giant. At the end, the divine power crystal giant knew that it couldn't run away, and it detonated the ball of divine power within its body, creating the current situation. We spent so much energy and didn't get anything in return. Demigod Ferocity was enraged. Lord Ferocity. Demigod Ferocity's group bowed their heads respectfully as they greeted him. They didn't dare to anger this demigod right now. Let's go. Demigod Ferocity led his group and was about to leave. Demigod Ferocity, I'm going to tell you some news. Sacred Lord Myriad Forms from your elephant men race has been captured by a human. Demigod Destruction smiled and said. What? That brat Myriad Forms? Demigod Ferocity suddenly stopped, and his eyebrows furrowed together. Which human expert? Demigod Ferocity asked. Sacred Lord Myriad Forms was extremely cocky and acted on his own. His relationship with the other members of the race wasn't very good, but Sacred Lord Myriad Forms had the eyes of Myriad Forms, meaning that his potential was very high. He would definitely be able to become a demigod in the future, and that was very important for their race. Hee. A human sacred lord named Zhao Feng. Demigod Destruction laughed with a hint of mockery. Zhao Feng was pretty famous during the war between the two lord dynasties. He used a unique weapon to defeat Sacred Lord Myriad Forms when he was just a quasi-sacred lord, and after breaking through to the mystic light realm, he managed to defeat Sacred Lord Myriad Forms head-on when they met again. Now, Sacred Lord Myriad Forms had been captured alive by Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng? An initial stage Sacred Lord? Demigod Ferocity's expression was grim. It was obvious that he had heard of Zhao Feng before. However, since Zhao Feng had broken through to the early stages only after entering the God Corps, not many people knew about it. Demigod Ferocity harumphed coldly and left with his group. At the same time, Demigod Destruction left with several others as well. The explosion had been too terrifying. Demigod Destruction and Demigod Ferocity were both severely injured, so it would be dangerous if they met a human demigod. Zhao Feng's heart shook as he saw the situation near the explosion with his left eye. We need to leave quickly. Zhao Feng immediately said before taking Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei with him and leaving. He didn't think that such a problem would come up after capturing Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. Originally, all Zhao Feng had to worry about in the God Corps was Demigod Dark Ocean from Nine Darkness Palace, but now another demigod had their eyes on him. Demigods stood at the pinnacle of the continent zone. Even if Demigod Ferocity was heavily injured right now, he could still kill Zhao Feng with the tap of a finger. There are two non-human demigods at the explosion center. Zhao Feng said after seeing that Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei were both curious. Hearing this, the expressions of Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei changed dramatically. Zhao Feng and company only slowed down and started to recover their yuan qi after traveling a long distance. Zhao Feng? What happened there? Why were there two demigods? Nan Gongsheng asked. Zhao Feng then told them what he saw. The divine power crystal giant self-destructed? Nan Gongsheng let out a long breath. He felt slightly regretful, but there was a lot of fortune within the God Corps. There should be divine power elsewhere. The trio went on their way after resting for a short while. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The trio heard the sounds of battle just ahead after traveling several miles. Wang tilde. A faint golden ripple covered Zhao Feng's left eye as he saw through the walls ahead of him. 3 golden white figures sped out from a pile of crystal ruins and headed in Zhao Feng's direction. Quick, don't let those sacred lords from the Grand Imperial Hall get away. They took many substandard god crystals and precious herbs. 5 non-human figures immediately chased from the pile of crystal ruins. Sacred Lord Gong Huang? Zhao Feng saw a familiar figure amongst those running away. Sacred Lord Gong Huang was the sacred lord from the Grand Imperial Hall that was responsible for protecting the ninth prince on the battlefield. Whoosh! Whoosh! There were two very powerful auras amongst the non-humans chasing after them. They could faintly see a half-transparent green-skinned female within a white beam of light. She was extremely charming, and she was the fastest. Behind her was a large middle-aged non-human with golden yellow fur. He held an ancient great axe and radiated a crushing pressure. Run. We might be able to meet another group of humans. A male wearing green armor in Sacred Lord Gong Huang's group said. Although he was a sacred king, this green-armored male was heavily injured. He had lost one of his right arms, and his face was pale white. It's a human group. The other sacred lord revealed a joyful expression when they saw Zhao Feng's figure, but his expression soon became ugly. An early-stage sacred lord? 3 mystic light realm sacred lords? The heart of the green-armored male who had lost an arm dropped when he saw Zhao Feng. He sighed as he sensed the aura of the 2 sacred kings behind him. There was a total of 6 non-humans chasing after them, including 2 sacred kings. 3 normal sacred lords would be useless facing such a terrifying combination. Zhao Feng? Sacred Lord Gong Huang reacted differently from the other 2, and he immediately called out with a joyful expression. The 2 sacred lords in his group were both upper echelon members of the Grand Imperial Hall that were usually in seclusion, so they didn't know the situation of the battlefield very well. Zhao Feng? Although the green-armored male didn't know Zhao Feng's appearance, he had heard the name before after coming out of seclusion. Zhao Feng, can you help us? Sacred Lord Gong Huang immediately asked. He knew very clearly how strong Zhao Feng, Zhao Yufei, and Nan Gongsheng were. Furthermore, these 3 were even stronger than before. Although he didn't expect Zhao Feng and company to defeat the non-humans chasing after them, if they teamed up with Sacred Lord Gong Huang and company, they should at least be able to safely retreat. The expressions of the green-armored male who lost an arm and the other sacred lord softened a little bit and revealed a hint of joy. They did indeed find that the trio in front of them was different after close inspection. The green-armored male also recognized Zhao Yufei's spiritual race bloodline. What do we get out of it? Zhao Feng's expression remained the same as he immediately responded. What, you? The early-stage sacred lord in the group became extremely angry. Zhao Feng, we're all humans. It's not unreasonable for you to help fight against the non-humans, right? The expression of the injured green-armored sacred king darkened. If it wasn't for the fact that he was injured and helpless, he wouldn't still be talking to Zhao Feng in such a nice tone. At this moment, the 6 non-human experts arrived. The leading 2 sacred kings inspected Zhao Feng and company, and their grim expressions softened as they revealed faint smiles. I thought that you managed to find some incredulous allies, but it's just 3 normal sacred lords. The non-human female smiled evilly. Chapter 1083, Teaming Up. I thought that you managed to find some incredulous allies, but it's just 3 normal sacred lords. The non-human female smiled evilly. What do I get out of it? Zhao Feng said once more to the injured green-armored sacred king. After all, if Zhao Feng and company were going to help, they would have to face 6 non-humans, including 2 sacred king experts. Zhao Feng wasn't willing to do such a risky thing for nothing. Nan Gongsheng didn't even want to bother at all. Furthermore, this green-armored sacred king would definitely have promised to give a reward for help if they had met sacred kings or demigods. The green-armored sacred king and his group were just relying on their identity as members of the Grand Imperial Hall to force Zhao Feng and company around. The expressions of the green-armored male and the other sacred lord were extremely ugly. If it wasn't for the fact that the situation was so urgent, they would have attacked Zhao Feng already. Being upper echelon members of a 4-star power that controlled the entire Great Gan Lord dynasty, Zhao Feng actually dared to blackmail them? We are upper echelon members of the Grand Imperial Hall, the force that supports the Great Gan Imperials. What you're doing isn't right. The green-armored male suppressed the anger in his heart. Sacred King Green Light, let's just hand over some of the resources we obtained. Sacred Lord Gong Huang persuaded. After all, if Zhao Feng and company could save them, they should receive something in compensation. These non-humans weren't exactly weak. Humans are very interesting. You're still fighting amongst yourselves even when death is upon you? The green female laughed. Kill them all. The other non-human sacred king gripped his axe and roared as he immediately attacked. The other non-humans behind laughed coldly and followed suit. If you're able to defeat the non-humans, we are willing to hand over 30% of what we obtained just now. Seeing that the enemy Sacred Kings had already taken action, Sacred King Greenlight immediately spoke. The other early-stage Sacred Lord nodded his head in agreement. In reality, they didn't think that Zhao Feng and company actually had the ability to resolve the danger this time. They just wanted to use Zhao Feng to stall for time because they had already sent out a request for help while they were being chased. 50%. Zhao Feng said. Ignorant humans, you're courting death. The non-human wielding the giant axe revealed a gruesome expression after seeing Zhao Feng and company continue to chat. Fine, 50%. Sacred King Greenlight was furious but had to agree to Zhao Feng's demands. Then let's attack together. Zhao Feng said after seeing them agree. Even if Sacred King Greenlight gave them everything, Zhao Feng wouldn't help if his group had to face everyone alone. Go. Sacred King Greenlight immediately roared. Wang Tilda. A widened gold longsword appeared in Sacred King Greenlight's left hand and released a bright light. Whoosh. Whoosh. The 6 humans charged forward. Boom. Nan Gongsheng sent out a wave of purple and blood-colored light that clashed against the non-human male wielding the axe. At the same time, the other 5 humans fought with the other non-human experts. This is the bloodline of the spiritual race. The transparent green non-human female instantly knew Zhao Yufei's identity the moment she clashed with her. Zhao Yufei summoned Heaven Earth Yuan Shi with every movement to increase the power of her moves. Spiritual Glow Saint Blow. Zhao Yufei's jade-like hand released a surge of purple light that shot toward the transparent green non-human Sacred King. On the other side, the clash between the non-human male wielding the axe and Nan Gongsheng caused heaven and earth to shake. The ancient axe in the non-human Sacred King's hands radiated a forceful power that suppressed everything as it slashed out a wave of destruction. Nan Gongsheng showed no signs of weakness as he circulated a wisp of the evil god's power. 2 evil demonic claws formed and blocked the non-human Sacred King's attack. Power of the evil god. Nan Gongsheng? The non-human male's expression turned to surprise as he recognized Nan Gongsheng's identity as well. On the other hand, Zhao Feng fought with the sacred lords of the non-human team. This was the plan that Zhao Feng and company had set up long ago. If they met a group that had sacred kings, Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei were responsible for stalling the sacred kings. Nan Gongsheng had the power of the evil god and the substandard god Golden Pond Shield. Stalling a sacred king by himself would be extremely easy. Zhao Yufei's battle power was also doubled in the god corpse due to her spiritual race bloodline. Zhao Feng looked to be the weakest, so he was easily ignored. He was responsible for quickly defeating the other sacred lords in the non-human team and turning the tide. Of course, this tactic only worked against non-human teams that had 2 sacred kings at most. However, Zhao Feng and company could only rely on this tactic to gain a slight advantage. It was extremely difficult for them to defeat the opponent unless they used some of their hidden cards. Once they met a non-human team with 3 or more sacred kings, Zhao Feng and company would be forced to retreat. Sky-destroying Sacred Lightning Palm. Zhao Feng merged the power of wind lightning with the physical force lightning domain and unleashed a scarlet golden palm of lightning. Wang tilde whoosh. Whoosh. A giant golden red palm of lightning pushed forward with extreme power in the pressure of the physical force lightning domain. Boom. The early-stage Sacred Lord and the late-stage Sacred Lord in front of Zhao Feng were unable to stop Zhao Feng's palm and were slammed into the crystal wall behind them. The early-stage non-human Sacred Lord was almost killed immediately by Zhao Feng's palm. Senior, we're not his match. The late-stage Sacred Lord was injured and scared of Zhao Feng. How is this possible? How can that brat be so strong? The transparent green non-human female was shocked. The strength of these 3 mystic light realm sacred lords had exceeded their expectations. What power! Sacred King Greenlight was stunned. He didn't think that Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei had reached a stage where they could stall sacred kings. Zhao Feng's strength wasn't to be underestimated either. From the looks of it, if they properly teamed up, they could defeat the non-humans. Great! Sacred Lord Gong Huang was overjoyed. Even he didn't expect the strength of these to have reached such a level. Thinking back to the first time they met, Zhao Feng's strength was only on par with Sacred Lord Myriad Forms, and Nan Gongsheng was only on par with Sacred Lord Sky Trampler. Clone. The 2 non-human Sacred Kings instantly unleashed their clones to help the late-stage Sacred Lord deal with Zhao Feng. The clones of these 2 Sacred Kings each had 50% battle power of the original, and after teaming up with the late-stage non-human Sacred Lord, they were able to suppress Zhao Feng. Sacred King Greenlight, your clone? Sacred Lord Gong Huang immediately asked. My clone was severely injured in the battle earlier and can't fight. Sacred King Greenlight decided not to support Zhao Feng. Wang tilde hu. Seeing that the situation was looking bad, Zhao Feng immediately released the projection of his little world of illusions to weaken the three non-humans in front of him. The consciousnesses of the two clones were weak, so their resistance against Zhao Feng's little world of illusions was weak. Zhao Feng's illusion techniques were more powerful in his little world projection. Purple Star Chaos. Soul Chaos. Zhao Feng circulated his left eye's power and used some of the simple illusion techniques he learned from the Ji family. In reality, Zhao Feng's talent in the Tao of illusions surpassed his talent in offensive eye bloodline techniques, he just didn't really focus on it. Not good, that brat's really troublesome. The non-human Sacred King wielding the axe felt that the situation wasn't looking very good. Even with the help of their clones, Zhao Feng was still able to fight and slowly gain the advantage. Furthermore, the humans still had three upper echelon members of the Grand Imperial Hall that couldn't be ignored either. Although Sacred King Greenlight was heavily injured, he still had the battle power of a late-stage Sacred Lord. Retreat. The transparent green non-human female immediately messaged the others. There was no need to keep on fighting in such a bad situation. Whoosh. 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 All of the non-humans started to retreat at the same time, and none of the humans chased after them. Thank you for helping, little brother Zhao. Sacred Lord Gong Huang immediately gave his thanks. Zhao Feng smiled faintly at Sacred Lord Gong Huang before turning to Sacred King Greenlight. May this senior please do as promised. Zhao Feng said. If the other two members of the Grand Imperial had attacked with full power just now, the fight would have ended earlier. But Sacred King Greenlight just looked on as the two non-human Sacred Kings sent out their clones and didn't help. Of course. Sacred King Greenlight handed over an interspatial ring extremely unwillingly. Sacred King Greenlight was a Sacred King and someone that had a lot of power within the Grand Imperial Hall. He would obviously do as promised. Zhao Feng took the interspatial ring and revealed an overjoyed expression after inspecting it. 43 precious herbs, 16 substandard god crystals, and 3 true god crystals. Zhao Feng believed that Sacred King Greenlight definitely didn't give him as much as he promised, but the amount of resources already exceeded Zhao Feng's expectations, so he didn't trouble Sacred King Greenlight. Goodbye. Zhao Feng immediately said goodbye to Sacred King Greenlight after completing their deal. Zhao Feng, Nan Gongsheng, and Zhao Yufei then left right away. Several powerful auras appeared behind Sacred King Greenlight soon after Zhao Feng and company left. Sacred King Greenlight, what happened? You're injured? The newcomer was Sacred King Feather Spirit. He immediately rushed over when he received Sacred King Greenlight's plea for help. We met some non-humans, but Zhao Feng's group arrived, and we managed to defeat the non-humans together. Sacred King Greenlight sighed. If Sacred King Feather Spirit had arrived earlier, he wouldn't have been blackmailed by those juniors. What? Zhao Feng? Sacred King Feather Spirit paused before revealing a happy look. The eyes of Sacred King Shine next to him also flashed. Brother Greenlight, which direction did Zhao Feng head in? Please tell me. Sacred King Feather Spirit was extremely excited. Brother Feather Spirit, why do you want Zhao Feng? Sacred King Greenlight was extremely surprised at how Sacred King Feather Spirit acted. Brother Greenlight, you might not know this, but Zhao Feng is the culprit that killed the 13th prince and attacked an upper echelon member of the Grand Imperial Hall. Sacred King Feather Spirit said. Of course, he completely ignored the fact that he had been severely injured by Zhao Feng. That junior is so evil? He also blackmailed me for precious resources that I just obtained. I'll follow Brother Feather Spirit to capture this brat. Sacred King Greenlight's expression changed, and he seemed to be even happier than Sacred King Feather Spirit. Chapter 1084, Relentless. That junior is so evil? He also blackmailed me for precious resources that I just obtained. I'll follow Brother Feather Spirit to capture this brat. Sacred King Greenlight's expression changed, and he seemed to be even happier than Sacred King Feather Spirit. Senior Feather Spirit, how can Zhao Feng be the culprit that killed the 13th prince? Sacred Lord Gong Huang was stunned. Back then, Some people from the Imperial side and the Land Province War Hall had investigated the 9th Prince's team and confirmed that Zhao Feng couldn't have been the one to kill the 13th Prince, but now Sacred King Feather Spirit said that Zhao Feng was the culprit. Sacred Lord Gong Huang didn't understand. He was also disgusted by Sacred King Greenlight's current actions. Zhao Feng and company had helped them, and Sacred King Greenlight had properly handed over his resources, but now, he was planning to steal them back? However, since these two were Mystic Light Realm Sacred Kings and had a lot of power in the Grand Imperial Hall, Sacred Lord Gong Huang obviously couldn't offend them. Humph, are you saying that there's something wrong with my investigations? Sacred King Feather Spirit's eyebrows furrowed as he glared at Sacred Lord Gong Huang. Invisible laws of heaven and earth locked onto Sacred Lord Gong Huang and completely suppressed his bloodline and sacred power. He was now a sheep that could be killed by anyone. This was the difference between an early-stage Sacred Lord and a Sacred King. Sacred Lord Gong Huang was nothing in front of Sacred King Feather Spirit. Sacred King Feather Spirit in particular was one of the more powerful and older existences among Sacred Kings. I'll follow the 3 seniors. The other early-stage Sacred Lord and Sacred King Greenlight's team immediately spoke. From his point of view, Zhao Feng would be unable to escape from 3 Sacred Kings either way, and he also wanted to continue scouting out the God Corps. Following 3 Sacred Kings was obviously safer. Brother Feather Spirit, they just left and headed in this direction. Sacred King Greenlight said after eating some healing medicines. Let's go. Sacred King Feather Spirit's group and Sacred King Greenlight's group teamed up, and a total of 7 Mystic Light Realm experts chased after Zhao Feng. Sigh. Zhao Feng, I can't help you at all. Sacred Lord Gong Huang sighed. He left the group and was traveling alone now, and he obviously didn't dare to stay behind in the God Corps as such. Sacred Lord Gong Huang had already obtained enough rewards, so he decided to leave. Whoosh. Sacred Lord Gong Huang retreated by relying on his memories of how they entered. Elsewhere in the God Corps, Zhao Feng and company moved through a complete pathway made from crystal walls. We should be at the center of the God Corps now. Zhao Feng slowly said. More and more precious herbs could be seen everywhere, and the walls became brighter and flashed with white lights. Brother Feng, behind us. Zhao Yufei seemed to sense something. Hearing this, a layer of faint gold instantly covered Zhao Feng's left eye as he scanned behind. Not good. Run. Zhao Feng immediately said. What happened? Nan Gongsheng was puzzled. Sacred King Greenlight and 2 other Sacred Kings from the Grand Imperial Hall are chasing after us. Zhao Feng said. He was sure that the 7 Mystic Light Realm experts chasing after them were coming to deal with him because Sacred King Feather Spirit was amongst them. Zhao Feng wouldn't be scared if it was just Sacred King Feather Spirit, but there were 3 Sacred Kings among the 7 people chasing after them. Zhao Yufei and Nan Gongsheng could only stall 1 Sacred King each at the very most. Since the opponents were stronger and they had more people, Zhao Feng could only choose to run. Nan Gongsheng instantly knew that something was amiss after hearing this, but he believed what Zhao Feng said. Whoosh. 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 The trio instantly used escaping secret techniques to quickly pass through the crystal walls. There was some fortune, but they didn't bother with it. Not far away from them. I sense the disturbance of their sacred power. That way. The blue-haired Sacred King Shai's eyes flashed as he charged forward. The intents of all 3 Sacred Kings covered the group so that their speed was increased to the same level. Brother Feng, they're getting closer. Zhao Yufei had an anxious expression as she sensed the disturbance behind them with her heaven-earth yuan qi. Zhao Feng was the fastest among the trio. If he used the Lightning Wing's spatial flash, he would be even faster than normal Sacred Kings. After him was Nan Gongsheng, then Zhao Yufei. However, it didn't matter how fast Zhao Feng was by himself. He couldn't just leave Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei behind by themselves, right? Zhao Feng could let Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei enter the misty spatial world, then escape by himself. The chances of him being able to run away would be rather high. However, the misty spatial world contained many of Zhao Feng's secrets, and he was worried about letting Nan Gongsheng enter. After all, Nan Gongsheng's personality had changed a lot. Brother Feng, should we use the misty spatial world and leave? Zhao Yufei said with some guilt. No. Zhao Feng immediately declined. He had only left behind a spatial marking where they entered. If they used the misty spatial world to leave, they would return to their starting point, and they had used a lot of time to reach the center. Where do you think you're running to? Sacred King Feather Spirit's voice sounded from behind as a wave of magnificent power crushed toward Zhao Feng and company like a tsunami. Zhao Feng and company were ready. They instantly released their little world projections. 3 powerful little world projections appeared behind Zhao Feng's group and blocked the intents of the 3 sacred kings. This brat has another little world? Sacred King Greenlight was very surprised as he looked at the projection of Zhao Feng's little world of wind lightning. He remembered that Zhao Feng had used the little world of illusions in their battle earlier. The power of Zhao Feng's little world of wind lightning was also very strong. So what if his little world is strong? His understanding isn't high enough, so he can't completely use the power of the little world. Sacred King Feather Spirit mocked. The 3 sacred kings all released their little world projections as well and formed more condensed power that crushed through space and proceeded forward. Boom. The clash of little worlds caused heaven and earth to tremble. Although the little worlds of Zhao Feng's group were strong, Sacred King Feather Spirit was correct. Their understanding and cultivation wasn't high enough, so they couldn't utilize the power of their little worlds to the level of the 3 sacred kings. However, Zhao Feng and company used this force to speed up. At the same time, a green dot of light appeared in Zhao Feng's hand. This was the Cloud Silkworm Saint Butterfly. A strong surge of sacred power brewed within the Cloud Silkworm Saint Butterfly's body. Boom. Boom. The Cloud Silkworm Saint Butterfly released dream pollen and its silk at the same time. The path behind Zhao Feng was instantly covered by a layer of rainbow-colored light and pollen. Zhao Feng then put the Cloud Silkworm Saint Butterfly away and had Sacred Lord Myriad Forms come out of the misty spatial world. Myriad Forms, World of Wind Lightning. Sacred Lord Myriad Forms focused his eyes and changed the elements of heaven and earth. Limitless elemental power of wind lightning instantly appeared. This power was extremely pure and could be easily controlled. Zhao Feng controlled the projection of his little world of wind lightning and merged the elemental power of wind lightning into his body. Wang tilde. A pair of scarlet wings of lightning spread out behind Zhao Feng's back and suddenly released a dazzling light as the elemental power of wind lightning surrounded Zhao Feng. Go. Zhao Feng circulated the power of wind lightning as he swept up Zhao Yufei, Nan Gongsheng, and Sacred Lord Myriad Forms and sped into a hallway. Perfect support. Zhao Feng couldn't help but praise. The eyes of Myriad Forms was very useful. At this moment, Zhao Feng's entire group was traveling at the same speed as him. However, he wasn't faster than a Sacred King without the lightning wing's spatial flash, and that could only be used by himself. In addition, the landscape was very complex, and with the divine aura interrupting them, the lightning wing's spatial flash was heavily restricted and almost couldn't be used at all even if he wanted to escape alone. Boom. The 3 sacred kings group broke through the layer of pollen and silk. That's Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. One of the sacred kings exclaimed. Zhao Feng, how dare you team up with the non-humans? Sacred King Feather Spirit roared in anger. Everyone in their group saw Sacred Lord Myriad Forms as soon as he appeared to help Zhao Feng. Chase after them. Sacred King Greenlight's expression was extremely ugly. Where would their face go if Zhao Feng managed to throw them off? Even if they had the help of Sacred Lord Myriad Forms, Zhao Feng and company wouldn't be able to escape. Whoosh! The 3 sacred kings circulated their magnificent power and chased after them. Stall them. Zhao Feng told Sacred Lord Myriad Forms. Understood, Master. Sacred Lord Myriad Forms' rainbow-colored eyes started to spin. The power of wind lightning behind Zhao Feng instantly turned into the heavy elemental power of earth. Boom. 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 The speed of the Sacred Kings group slowed down. Of the 3 Sacred Kings, some specialized in the element of wind or water, but none of them specialized in the element of the earth. However, Sacred Lord Myriad Forms' cultivation was too low, so all the 3 Sacred Kings needed to do was burn a wisp of their mystic light sacred power, and they would be able to completely ignore this resistance. Master, my cultivation is too low. I can't stop them. Sacred Lord Myriad Forms told Zhao Feng. Why are these guys chasing after us? Nan Gongsheng's expression was ugly, and he radiated a bloodthirsty and cruel aura as if he really wanted to kill everyone behind them, but he knew that he wouldn't be their match. Zhao Feng gave a dry cough. The target of Sacred King Feather Spirit and the blue-haired Sacred King seemed to be just him. This meant that Zhao Feng was basically dragging down Zhao Yufei and Nan Gongsheng. Sacred King Feather Spirit, are you sure you want to chase after us? Zhao Feng asked loudly. Wasting time to chase after someone in the God Corpse was a dumb choice. assassinating an imperial prince and humiliating me. You have nowhere to run to." Sacred King Feather Spirit hesitated for a moment before saying. They had chased after them for such a long time already. If they gave up now, they would become a joke. "Then don't blame me for doing this." Zhao Feng's tone was cold as he radiated killing intent. Shoo! A dark silver bow and a dark golden arrow appeared in Zhao Feng's hands. Wang tilde. Zhao Feng put the replica god-slaying arrow onto the sky-locking bow and pulled back the bowstring. A terrifying dark golden light spread through the air as the image of a 100-yard-long arrow formed. A soul-focused power instantly slammed into the 7 mystic light realm experts. God-slaying arrow? Sacred King Feather Spirit was frightened when he saw Zhao Feng take out that arrow. The 3 sacred kings instantly stopped as their hearts shook. Some of the weaker sacred lords felt as if their souls had been stabbed, and they started to feel pain. Their legs went soft, and their faces were pale with fear when they heard Sacred King Feather Spirit say the words God-slaying arrow. Chapter 1085, Fortune in the Center. Wait, no, that's not a God-slaying arrow. Sacred King Feather Spirit felt the power within the arrow and shook his head. They had all witnessed the power of a true God-slaying arrow when Demigod Dragon Emperor used it on the Black Destruction Serpent Dragon. That power could destroy heaven and earth, and anyone weaker than a demigod wouldn't be able to survive. "That brat is just scaring us," Sacred King Feather Spirit swore. The sacred lords behind the 3 sacred kings instantly let out a breath when they heard this. Where did this brat obtain replica god-slaying arrows? Sacred King Shai was puzzled. From the looks of it, that replica god-slaying arrow Zhao Feng had wasn't exactly weak, but which blacksmith in the Great Gon Lord dynasty could craft such a high-grade weapon? Zhao Feng released the bowstring at this instant. Whoosh! A giant dark golden arrow phantom that could pierce through everything shot out with a storm of dark gold. Defend! Sacred King Feather Spirit's expression turned serious as he spoke. The other 2 sacred kings both immediately circulated their sacred power and activated the power of their little world projections. The pathway was very small, so they couldn't hide anywhere. They could only retreat or block. However, since the crystal walls could block divine sense and the landscape was very complex, if they retreated, Zhao Feng might be able to use this chance to escape. The difficulty of finding Zhao Feng afterward would be very difficult. The most important thing was that Zhao Feng was very close to them, which increased the power of the replica god-slaying arrow. However, the 3 sacred kings believed that, as long as they went on full defense, it wouldn't be hard to block the power from this replica god-slaying arrow. Hu tilde Wang. The 3 sacred kings merged the power of their little world projections and formed it into a dark blue defensive dimension. The 3 sacred kings each used secret defensive techniques with the dimension in order to protect themselves. Bam! The giant dark golden arrow shot forward and unleashed a storm of metal and lightning. Cracks actually appeared on the walls nearby. Not good. This replica god-slaying arrow targets the soul. Sacred King Feather Spirit found that something was amiss. Although attacks made of mystic light sacred power could pass through the physical dimension and harm the soul, an attack that specifically targeted the soul was very different. What a terrifying power of God Tribulation Lightning. How does this brat have the power of God Tribulation Lightning? Sacred King Greenlight was already severely injured, and he was the first among the 3 sacred kings to fall. Although the 3 sacred kings could block most of the replica god-slaying arrow's power, soul attacks could pass through everything. It even reached the sacred lords behind them as a bombardment of metal and God Tribulation Lightning exploded in the soul dimension. Boom! The explosion settled, and the expressions of the 3 sacred kings were extremely ugly. The one with the heaviest injuries was Sacred King Greenlight. He was severely injured to begin with, and he was now even weaker. The one with the lightest injuries was Sacred King Shai. He specialized in the soul, so his resistance was stronger, but he was unable to fully face the bombardment of the God Tribulation Lightning and elemental metal. Damn it, we were tricked by that brat. Sacred King Feather Spirit cursed. Zhao Feng taking out the replica god-slaying arrow frightened them, so they weren't able to determine its offensive capabilities. They lowered their guards when they found out it was a replica, but its power greatly exceeded their expectations. The 3 sacred kings knew that they couldn't catch up to Zhao Feng anymore, so they just sat down and healed their injuries. Don't chase after that brat anymore. There's still a lot of fortune in the god corpse, we can't waste all our time on him. Sacred King Feather Spirit suggested. He was the first to suggest killing Zhao Feng. The others nodded their heads in agreement. "But if we meet him again, I will cut him into 10,000 pieces." Sacred King Feather Spirit had an ugly expression as he spoke through gritted teeth. Elsewhere in the God Corpse, Zhao Feng ran away with Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei as soon as he shot his replica God-slaying arrow. He also ordered Sacred Lord's myriad forms to change the element of the Yuan Qi in the pathway, as well as erase any aura they left behind when running. Zhao Feng knew that it was impossible to completely stop 3 Sacred Kings with just one replica God-slaying arrow, but he couldn't take out the true God-slaying arrow since he still had demigod enemies. In order to make up for it, he put all his God Tribulation lightning symbols into the replica God-slaying arrow. Besides, Zhao Feng's control over the soul-based God-slaying arrow was better, so he could unleash more of its power. "Let's rest for a bit," Zhao Feng said after they managed to completely escape from the 3 Sacred Kings. He used up all his God Tribulation lightning symbols, so Zhao Feng needed to recover or else his soul attacks wouldn't have much of an effect, dramatically weakening the strength of their entire group. "Sure." Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei both agreed. After all, Zhao Feng saved them this time. Besides, if Zhao Feng wasn't at his peak, the two of them would be unable to handle all the dangers within the God Corpse. Zhao Feng took out some resources that helped the soul from the misty spatial world. Some of them came from what Sacred King Green Light had given him. Zhao Feng took all the soul treasures and gave the rest to Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei. Zhao Feng picked out the resources most useful to him and started to duplicate them in the dimension of his left eye. Zhao Feng then ate some herbs and circulated the soul recovery divine technique. Now that Zhao Feng's soul recovery divine technique had reached the peak, his soul defending capabilities and recovery speed had increased dramatically. In addition, Zhao Feng's soul was a lightning soul body, meaning that the symbols of God Tribulation lightning were part of Zhao Feng's soul. This meant that his God Tribulation lightning symbols would also recover when he circulated the soul recovery divine technique. Of course, while healing his soul and regenerating his God Tribulation lightning symbols, Zhao Feng also used the 10,000 divine thoughts technique to multitask. A substandard God crystal appeared in Zhao Feng's hand, as well as many precious resources that contained the elements of earth, wind, and lightning. Zhao Feng had completely consolidated his 5-elemental wind lightning technique at the early stages of the 9th level. Zhao Feng used substandard God crystals to cultivate, and because the herbs in the God Corpse were very effective, his earth of wind lightning was about to break through to the late stages. The resources in the God Corpse also greatly benefited his life force and body. While cultivating, Zhao Feng also inspected Nan Gongsheng and Zhao Yufei. A purple and blood-colored figure gave off a wicked and evil aura as it started to condense in Nan Gongsheng's little world. Nan Gongsheng seems to be creating a clone. Zhao Feng saw the situation within the Nan Gongsheng's little world. With Nan Gongsheng's cultivation, he could have created a clone a long time ago, but he was busy increasing his own strength and consolidating his cultivation. On the other side, Zhao Yufei was refining her mystic light sacred power and occasionally eating some herbs to gain comprehension. The biggest advantage of the spiritual race was their source of power. Although Zhao Yufei was only at the early stages of the mystic light realm, her mystic light sacred power was already comparable to Sacred King's. The stronger her mystic light sacred power was, the stronger her spiritual race bloodline's power was. Zhao Feng opened his eyes a day later. "Let's go." Although the trio had obtained a lot and needed to enter seclusion to make use of it, time was precious in the God Corpse. They didn't have any time to cultivate here. Although Zhao Feng hadn't fully recovered his God Tribulation lightning in one day, it had mostly recovered. Zhao Yufei and Nan Gongsheng exited seclusion unwillingly. Meow meow. The little thieving cat stood on Zhao Feng's shoulder and threw several coins into the air before pointing in a certain direction with its paws. "Brother Feng, I also feel an unusual disturbance of Yuan Qi in that direction," Zhao Yufei said with a smile. Whoosh. 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 The trio started to move through the crystal maze once more. Now that they had arrived at the center of the God Corpse, the walls here were extremely tough and hard to destroy. This meant that there would be less fortune. However, once they did find something, it would be far better than the fortune on the outskirts. The fortune might even contain the secret to becoming a god. The disturbance of Yuan Qi is becoming stronger. Zhao Yufei was sure that they had picked the right target. Space suddenly expanded after passing by countless paths. They seemed to arrive at another place as a weird power filled heaven and earth. At the very center of this area was an enormous crystalline item. They couldn't even see where it ended. Many human and non-human experts surrounded the area beneath this enormous crystalline item, including demigod experts. This should be a certain part of the god corpse's internal organs. Zhao Feng activated his sight to the maximum and concluded after using his transparency ability. Let's go. The trio headed toward the group of humans in the distance. Humans and non-humans both gathered beneath the enormous crystalline item. The non-humans were led by demigod Arcane Void, a demigod of the Dark Capital cult, while the humans were led by demigod Weathered Breath, a Grand Elder of Sky Suspension Palace. The humans were slightly stronger, but they would need to pay a heavy price in order to defeat the non-humans. Besides, what was most important right now was the fortune within the god corpse. Another group is here. They're humans. Many human sacred lords spoke joyfully when they saw Zhao Feng and company arrive, but they shook their heads when they sensed Zhao Feng and company's strength. On the other hand, demigod Withered Breath, who seemed to be an ancient piece of wood, glanced at the trio. Zhao Feng and company were extremely low-key as they slowly approached. They didn't bother with anything else. Zhao Feng felt an ancient and old soul intent the closer they got. It was extremely thick and kept on eroding his soul. There's a very strong soul intent in there. Zhao Feng looked at the enormous crystalline item with joy. The trio slowly approached and sat beneath the faint red crystal. They could feel a weird intent radiating from it. All of the humans and non-humans present were using this power to increase their soul intent. What's in there? Zhao Feng inspected the enormous crystalline item. There were many cracks that spread out in every direction between the two forces. A faint red soul aura leaked out from the cracks. The closer one was, the more clearly one could feel this intent. At a certain moment in time, a faint golden layer of light covered Zhao Feng's left eye as he looked through the crystal walls.